Hi everyone, it's Emily, and I've beaten over 10 brand new releases so far this year in 2026. So today I wanted to go through them one by one and share which ones were my favorites and which ones have left me rather disappointed. I have a mix of all sorts of different genres here, from JRPGs to survival horror. So let's get to the first one I beat this year so far, which was Trails Beyond the Horizon. This is the latest entry in the Legend of Heroes Trails series, which happens to be my favorite franchise of all time. And to say this was a highly anticipated release for me is an understatement. This is the third entry in the Calvard arc, and this one kind of leaves me slightly mixed, but mostly in a positive way. And why I say this is because most Trails games, they're very well known as a slow burn sort of franchise. And you expect to have a very slow burn experience, mostly in the first game of every arc. With this being the third entry, I was kind of anticipating that we would get kind of more into the meat of what makes the Calvard arc separate or different from the previous ones, because this is where things are starting to really come together. You have all these different factions with different motivations, and you learn a lot more about the whole entire world of Zumeria and what's been happening. And so I kind of came into this game with very high expectations, especially after experiencing the demo in December, where it really was a perfect way to get everyone very hyped for what's to come in the series and push things forward. But despite the very hyped prologue, the first act was, a typical kind of Trails game, but one that you usually expect to be like in the first game of the arc. One that you expect the very slow atmospheric building where you just kind of experience the town and your surroundings and interact with some characters here and there. And so it kind of felt a little misplaced, I would say, in the third entry of the game. But once you get to different areas of Calvard, things start to ramp up. And towards the end, it was a speeding bullet. Let me just say that. And Trails is notorious for having these major cliffhangers. And to say that there was a major cliffhanger at the end of this game, again, an understatement. So I love this game. We even did a spoiler cast over on my podcast that I co-host, the JRPG Pursuit. Definitely check that out. We had some other big Trails heads, Maggie from Level Up Legacy, as well as Cam from Party Chat, come and join us. It was a lot of fun, a lot of chaotic theories all around this game. So definitely check that out if you're also a Trails fan and want to just talk about what happened in the latest entry. So I, of course, have the physical copy of this. I pre-ordered this, and Nisa also sent me a copy of the collector's edition, so I have multiple editions of this game, and very much happy to have it in my collection, and it's here to stay, because I love Trails. Enough said. The next game I was fortunate enough to play in January as well was Code Vein 2. This was my first ever Souls-like, 3D game, if you count Hollow Knight as a Souls-like game as well. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. I've always been kind of intimidated by Souls-like games, and I came into Code Vein 2 knowing that it should be slightly easier because they lean more into the JRPG side, where you could kind of build out your character, grind things out, and have a little bit of an easier time if you're not so keen on brutal difficulty. And there was, of course, an adjustment period of me trying to figure out how to tackle some bosses or how to build out my character. For the most part, though, it was pretty smooth sailing. And I really appreciated how this game centered more around the characters. From what I understand, Souls-like games, while there's, of course, characters and lore and interactions, it's mostly like with the environment and the underlying things. Whereas in Code Vein 2 here, it felt a little bit more like a JRPG, so a little bit more at home for me because they had some quirky characters and relationships we build with other characters, and I really appreciated that aspect of the game and how they integrated time travel and some other cool elements throughout it. So I played this game on stream and was very glad I did, and it was my first, again, Souls-like experience. Now, is this my favorite game from this year? No. But I very much enjoyed it, and so much so that I want to go back and play the first Code Vein to, kind of compare them. I know the experience is slightly different because you have more of an open world like map with Code Vein 2 compared to the first Code Vein, but they share, I think, a similar DNA when it comes to the combat and those sort of things. And I think emphasis on storytelling, like in a JRPG sort of way, compared to maybe a Western RPG approach of storytelling. So I've kind of, opened the floodgates of Souls-like games and plan on playing more. In fact, I think my next one is most likely going to be Lies of P. That's the one that has, so far in my channel point redemptions, has been chosen as a game for me to stream. So don't be surprised if you see me stream that sometime soon. But Code Vein 2 is great. I'm probably not going to buy the physical because I hear it doesn't run that great on the PS5. If you have a base PS5, that is. If you have a PS5 Pro, I hear it's less of an issue. But a base PS5 leaves a little bit to be desired, despite, I think, some of the patches they've done. And there is going to be, I think, some extra DLC content for Code Vein 2 that I probably will check out at some point. I don't know when. But yeah, overall, it was a great experience. I do recommend it. Now to transition yet to another genre, I got to play Resident Evil Requiem as well this year. This was my third ever Resident Evil game. I had previously played Resident Evil 2 Remake as well as Resident Evil 4 Remake before this. And I have to say, I think Resident Evil Requiem had like a great marriage between what I think of as survival horror as well as some cool like action sort of gameplay. Graphically, it was stunning and the controls felt very good. The parts with Grace especially were very spooky, especially in the darker areas, and you really had to sneak around and utilize some stealth rather than with Leon's approach, which was, of course, to just mow everyone down with all the artillery and whatever you have your hands on. So I really did appreciate switching back and forth between those two different perspectives so that it wouldn't feel so fatiguing, doing one or the other. They really, I think, balance themselves very well. And I think because of that balance and also kind of where the story went, I do think it's probably my favorite Resident Evil game that I've played so far. I've, of course, only played the modern Resident Evil games, and I am looking forward to Code Veronica, or just Veronica, the remake when that's coming out as well, because I think that's going to be by the same team that did 2 and 4 remakes. Someday I might try some of the older school Resident Evil games, but overall I've been pleasantly surprised how much I've enjoyed the modern take on Resident Evil. So I definitely think I'm invested in the series and do want to go back, but also forward. Not so much, I've talked about this in a previous video about whether or not I'm going to be rebuying these games in a physical edition. I'm perfectly happy to be playing these on PC with a keyboard and mouse, so I don't really see myself buying the physical, though it is, I think, a good enough game to get a physical if you are into the controls using a controller for these games. So again, this was a game that did not disappoint either. So really, January, February was off to a great start when it comes to new releases, at least for me. After Resident Evil Requiem, I was able to play also Dragon Quest VII Reimagined. This is my first time playing Dragon Quest Reimagined, and my, I think, technically 4th Dragon Quest game. Prior to that, I had played 11 and then the HD2D 1 and 2 remakes. So 7 Reimagined makes the 4th Dragon Quest game. But Dragon Quest VII Reimagined did have a different feel compared to the previous Dragon Quest games I played. And I did really appreciate, actually, the approach. I think there were some maybe issues with difficulty balance. I feel like a lot of it, the game did make it easier than it needed to. I, of course, could have probably ramped up the difficulty, but I was just playing on normal mode because this is another game that I was streaming and was just kind of there for the ride and vibes. The new art style they introduced for Reimagined, I thought was very fitting and lovely, and I especially enjoyed the localization of all the different islands and the different accents they tried to impose. I know it's not quite like that in the Japanese version, but I think this is kind of where it's fun to see how localizers try to give different flavors of personalities and things to some of these characters and make them a little bit more memorable, at least to English or Western audiences. And the story for Dragon Quest VII Reimagined, I enjoyed as well. I liked how they integrated time travel. It's not quite, the same as time travel with, say, Chrono Trigger, but overall, I do think The time traveling that you have in Dragon Quest VII is a little bit underrated, especially considering this is from the PS1 era originally. I thought they did some very smart things when trying to introduce time travel in a game. The class system was also a lot of fun to experiment with. I didn't experiment too much with it, but once I figured out what classes I wanted for my characters, it was really fun to just build them out to their maximum potential and just mow down all the enemies. I really didn't struggle at all with the combat or the bosses, which does, I think, make, at least when I was streaming it, a nice experience. I'm not really sure how I would have felt if I wasn't streaming the game. I probably would have experimented potentially with upping up the difficulty, but then again, it's nice to have like a shorter experience. It was not a very long JRPG by any means. You can pad it out more, but if you just wanted to mainline it, which is what I mostly did, and do all the side quests, it's not the longest game in terms of, JRPGs out there. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. I loved doing all the narrations and voice acting for the NPCs. I think that was probably the most fun I had on stream. So definitely, I think a great game, and I do think it has plenty of bones, especially if you've never played a Dragon Quest game or you're new to JRPGs. This is, I think, a great JRPG to start with because of the low barrier entry, because you really don't need to know too much about how to play. The game explains it, I think, very well, and you can kind of go from there to see how much you want to experiment with like the combat and stuff. But yeah, I think overall it's a great game. I do think I'll be picking that up on the PS5 physically at some point. I'm not sure when, but I did play it on PC, and probably will rebuy it physically because I did really enjoy it. Next for Game 6 is Reanimal. So this is by the creators of Little Nightmares 1 and 2. They were not, those original creators did not make Little Nightmares 3, but instead left Bandai Namco and made Reanimal. And so these sort of games are these kind of spooky, cute, but kind of weird, I don't know, games. They're kind of like platformers with stealth elements, but not quite like a traditional platformer. It's a little bit hard to explain exactly what genre these games are, but it's kind of one of those, if you've seen it, you kind of know what I mean. So platformer, but not, and has some horror elements, but it's not like super scary. But honestly, I would say out of all like the Little Nightmares games I played and Reanimal, it does have the most kind of like creepy themes kind of hidden inside of the lore of what's going on. These games have very much like quiet storytelling where they don't have voice acting or anything, and you just see the characters interact with things and things happen that you visually see. And definitely some of those images were a little horrifying, I won't lie. But it did leave me a little confused, I think, by the end. I was not really sure what I was seeing at a certain point. So while some of the, I guess, mystery makes it more horrifying, some of it also just was like, wait, was I supposed to get that? I'm not really sure. I think this is another game I streamed, and I think also my community were like, we think we know what happens, but not exactly. So it kind of felt like that. Overall, I did like the gameplay, and I thought some of the puzzles, they integrate a lot of like puzzles and things in this, was interesting. And there was, I think, some cool like climaxes towards the end. It's always these kind of games, I think they do kind of build up, and there's something really cool that happens at the end. And then it reveals something, and I thought they kind of paced that pretty well. But for all these games, I do think it's really hard to beat the first Little Nightmares and the second Little Nightmares. This one, kind of like Little Nightmares 3, didn't quite live up to those two and those expectations, but there are still some cool things that were experimented with, and I think they did go more creepy than any of the other Little Nightmares games were. So that was nice to see, and I'm curious how the studio will continue to kind of evolve this sort of gameplay and continue to push it. But with all that said, though, again, it's not my favorite. I'm glad I played it, but it felt like more of like a middling sort of gaming experience. So like a 7 out of 10, which I don't know if that's quite as something that I would want to rebuy physically, for my collection, as I'm trying to build my curated collection of games that I love, and all that. But I'm glad I played it. Next up is Fatal Frame 2 Remake. This is the second remake we have on this list here, and I've never played a Fatal Frame game. So this was very much a new experience. The survival horror / horror genre, I'm not as familiar with. I've really only played Resident Evil games and now Fatal Frame 2 Remake. So I wasn't really sure what I was getting into. There was definitely, you know, the Japanese horror aesthetic, immaculate vibes. Definitely there was a lot of creepy moments during this experience, and it's interesting how you use the camera to basically evaporate all these ghosts and things that are trying to attack you. It did feel a bit overwhelming because I was basically streaming this game when it came out, and that was before all the patches that Koei Tecmo did. So I felt like there was a weird balancing issue, especially in difficulty early on, that it wasn't so much that it was hard, it was just that it was aggravating at how much film that you're using, and the respawns of all those spirits and things that just kept attacking you, so you couldn't really... There's some like areas like I didn't know where I was going, so I had to backtrack to figure out where I should have gone and things like that, and I just had to keep encountering the same sort of spirits, and then they would get aggravated, which means that when they're about to die, they just get more powerful and then try to tame them again. It was very an aggravating experience, I think, by the end, which made it less fun for me. And so I was very glad to just like finally finish the game. I didn't try to do any of the other endings. I just did the base ending, which I know is the bad ending. But at that point in time, while I liked elements of the game, I was just kind of over it. And I feel bad because I really wanted to like the game. I thought there were some really cool elements that I liked, that you're in this like small little village, you don't really know what's going on, and you get to like read these little journal entries and piece together what really happened and what's happening with your sister and, you know, things like that. The storytelling I thought was good. It's just some of the gameplay and the pacing I did not enjoy. But all that said, would I try another Fatal Frame game? Maybe. I just hope it has better balancing issues where it's just less frustrating to play. But on to our next game at number 7 is Ys 10 Proud Nordics. So I'm including this here because the Proud Nordics version is new, even though Ys 10 did launch, was it now 2 years ago in the West? But this is my first time playing Ys 10, and I have to say, I really think it's my favorite Ys game. I was really blown away by how much I was attached to all the characters, not just, of course, Adel, but I loved Karja and how you swap between Adel and Karja and their dynamic. They felt like an old married couple, which I very much enjoyed their banter and things like that. Adel, as a silent protagonist, didn't really feel like a silent protagonist. He was able to show a lot of personality despite being a so-called silent protag, which I found refreshing. And all the different like Scandinavian sort of lore and different islands you get to come across, and characters you get to invite to your ship and you meet along the way. It was just such a fun journey. I really enjoyed it. I love the ship battles, and of course the combat. Ys just has some of the best action RPG combat ever. I think even though it's been a franchise that's been, it's at least 40 years old now. It gets very much, I think, overlooked, as it doesn't... I think in the JRPG community, we know Ys is good. But outside of that, I think more people would really appreciate Ys if they give it a try. But unfortunately, I know the so-called anime games, some people won't try them. But really, I think this game is just so good. It might be my favorite game of this year that I played. I know I have Trails in Sky Second Chapter, which probably would be my favorite game of the year, but that's not out yet. So right now, my favorite game I've played so far this year has been Ys 10 Proud Nordics. It was so good. So many great vibes. I love the story. I love the combat. It just felt so fluid, and all the different, the different approach to the combat I thought was also refreshing for the Ys franchise in general, because you have more focus on breaking shields and then going in with these combination attacks that are really flashy and fun. It was just such a good time. I'm really excited for whatever is next for Ys. I think Falcom they're one of my favorite, if not my favorite, developers. And so I'm very much looking forward to all their games, including Ys now. I've become, as someone who's been playing all the Trails games for the last few years, I'm finally dipping my toes more into Ys, and I'm very, very impressed and looking forward to more. I don't have an East 10 Proud Nordics physical here with me. I had the base 10 one. I gave it to someone to borrow so they could try it. I do plan on picking this up physically because, again, it's become one of my favorite games I played, like in general, but also of this year. Next is another sort of remaster game. Is it that different from the original? Not really, but this is the first time I played it, which is Tales of Berseria HD Remaster. And this is my second ever Tales of game. And I had to say, I really vibed with this one. When I was playing Tales of Exilia, I was a little unsure if Tales was really a series for me because I think, especially the combat, I felt it wasn't quite as fluid as what I think of an action RPG. After especially playing East 10, Proud Nordics, going and playing a Tales game, especially, like, of course, it's an older Tales game, but I think the emphasis on some of the clunky combination moves, it felt like we were playing like a fighting game rather than like an action RPG game. And for Exilia, I never quite got the grasp of how to master those systems. So at a certain point, I kind of felt like I was almost button mashing, but not quite, because I knew there were some things you had to do. Berseria, on the other hand, felt more natural, but I did less experimenting because I mostly stuck with the main character, Velvet, because her combat style just felt the most natural to me of how to go about it. I'm still, I think, have a lot to learn when it comes to figuring out how to play Tales games, but I really enjoyed the combat more in Berseria, and I also really enjoyed the story. Like, I think on the surface, a lot of people just think of Berseria as some like angsty revenge plot, and while it does have that, the further you play in, you kind of see some nuances and some growth within a lot of these characters who may have been blinded by revenge early on. And it's really interesting to see kind of the developments. And I really love the party, like this party of characters, the whole ensemble. They were just so fun of how they interacted with each other. The skits were fun, and just mostly their interactions just in the main story I really enjoyed. I will probably pick up the PS5 version of the physical because I played it on PC first. So usually if I want to get the physical after playing it digitally on PC, that usually is an indicator that I really like the game. Next up is inKONBINI. This is a game that's published by Serenity Forge, where you have like a summer job and you're working for a convenience store, or inKONBINI in Japan. And so you're like in a small town. This takes place in the 90s, and it's just all vibes. I was really intrigued when they first, I think, showed this off of was it Nintendo Direct? Or it was like a Nintendo Indie Direct. And there are some sort of simulator sort of aspects to the gameplay where you stock shelves, you organize it, you make sure like all the labels are front forward facing, nothing's being misplaced in this little convenience store. And you want to also interact with the guests who come in, and if they have any requests, you go help them out. But really, I think the heart of this game is the characters and their story. Like, I just felt like all the interactions you have and how the characters are connected to one another, the more you learn about them and some of their trials and tribulations that they've experienced in life, and how you kind of see them or help them out through some of their terrible times. It was just such a heartwarming experience. I really liked this game. It's not a super long game, but it's one that I think is very well worth playing, especially if you like more narrative-driven games. The physical is coming out this fall, and I do plan on picking that up probably for the Switch too. It's the one I'm going to go with. But yeah, inKONBINI, very, very sweet game. And one I recommend, especially if you like any of the things I just mentioned there. Next up is Ariana and the Elder Codex. This makes the 10th game. And so this is the 10th game or new release that I did get to beat this year. And I actually have the physical here. So I did play the PS5 version. This was sent to me by Idea Factory. And I did do the first part of this, I want to say like the first half of this game on stream, and was really vibing with it. So much so that I ended up just beating the game off stream, like right away. It's more like a RPG. It's kind of like an action RPG, but side-scrolling, and there's some platforming elements of it. But what was really cool was how they interwoven the magic system, where you are this librarian, Ariana, and in order to kind of fix some things with magic, you have to go inside these books or these library books and then amend the pages. And I just thought the concept was really cool. And you, in each the storybooks, you follow kind of the plot of the story as you amend the pages. And there's this overarching story with Ariana and her parents and some other things that are happening inside the library. That was really cool to see how that unfolded. But the combat was a lot of fun. There's a lot of different combinations you can do with different elements that you pick up thanks to the library. That's where you acquire your magic powers from the library books. What's really neat, though, is they had this system where basically if you get kind of mobbed by enemies and they're given the right kind of like elements or something, charges at them, you're able to do kind of these, what do you call it? It's been a little bit, so I'm forgetting the terminology, but you're able to basically cast these spells that would then collide with one another and do all these different sort of implosions. And it was really neat to see that play out. So there was some challenging bosses by the end of this game. I actually had to drop the difficulty down on the last boss because I was so into it, and I was getting a little frustrated that I couldn't quite get the last boss quite yet. But despite doing that, I had a lot of fun. And it's just a nice and short and sweet experience. I want to say this was less than 14 hours, but highly recommended. And it's by Compile Hearts, which I was surprised that this may be the first Compile Hearts game that I really vibed with. So, recommend. The last game that I recently beat was the Adventures of Elliot. So this was another highly anticipated release for me. I think I put it up in S ranking of most anticipated games for 2026, or just from the, what was it, in June, we had all those showcases of games coming out in the future. I put it up there in S rank because it gave me a lot of A Link to the Past vibes with it. And I do plan on making a video actually comparing Adventures of Elliot with A Link to the Past, because I have recently been playing that on stream, and I have thoughts when comparing the two. But for the most part, I really enjoyed Elliot. I thought it was really cool how they interwoven time travel gameplay that was reminiscent to like A Link to the Past, or just like a Zelda-like, where you get to acquire different tools and weapons, and you have different combinations when attacking, and get to explore various areas, do very light, easy puzzles, and things like that. Really, what was interesting about this was this had more of a story, like a traditional JRPG story kind of unfold as you play. So it's kind of like a Zelda-like experience that has some underlying JRPG elements to it to make it more like an action RPG. And I think one of the more disappointing aspects about this game is that the prologue raises expectations very high. But once you get kind of past that prologue and like in the first chapter, there's a little bit of a lull that happens for a large portion of the game. And that has to do a little bit with the repetitive nature of different time periods that you get to travel to. And so some of it felt a little bit repetitive. And really the crux of the story is at the end, because the game does encourage you to beat it 3 times, or rather get the 3 endings. And so when you get kind of, I guess, the first ending, if you stop there, you're just gonna have a very disappointing experience. And so usually looking up a guide will kind of help you how to get to the gold ending, but really getting to that gold ending makes it so satisfying, the whole experience. Like the whole story comes together and makes it worthwhile, despite some of the, I think, poor pacing that happens in the middle of the game with the repetitive nature. But overall, it's a beautiful game. I love the cats. There's so many cats. Definitely one I would recommend. I do want to get the physical on the PS5 eventually. But I think this is another example where Team Asano, if they were to make like a sequel or like a spiritual successor of this game, there are some notes that they need to take into account in making a better game later on. But we've seen them do this with like, Bravely Default, as well as Octopath Traveler. I feel like those series, they always get better with each iteration. And so I think this Adventures of Elliot, if they were to do another one, I think they will kind of learn from their mistakes and make a better game in the future. But all that said, it's still a good game. It just had some flaws that are a little bit hard to overlook, but the ending kind of makes it still worthwhile. That's how I would put it. But yeah, I was able to beat all 11 of those games this year, which is kind of wild that we're in July and I was able to beat 11 brand new games, all of varying lengths, some longer than others, but still 11 games. I just want to briefly mention, there's some other games that I've started playing, but haven't quite beaten yet. All of these I think I've sampled on stream. If you're interested in some first impression streams of these. The first one being Monster Hunter Stories 3. I thought this was a beautiful game. Someday I want to play the rest of it, but I was able to do the demo, which is basically the prologue, and was really vibing with kind of how they set up the whole story. I could see how the gameplay loop of getting better monsties and upgrading different areas to get just really cool monsters would be really fun. So someday I want to get back to that game. I just don't know when. It's so hard to fit in all these new games coming out. Especially when we approach the fall, it's going to get even harder. Another game that I played the first bit, and I do plan on beating it off stream at some point, hopefully before the end of this year, is Starbites. This game is really cool. I very much vibe with this. I was able to actually speak with the creator of this at PAX West last year. I was on a panel with him to talk about Starbites because I was able to sample it prior to release, which was really neat. I've been wanting more sci-fi JRPG experiences, and this is a sci-fi JRPG experience. I think the combat is a lot of fun, and it's cool to kind of travel around on this robot, kind of metabot, if you will, which is fun. There's some good, I think, voice acting and other cool stuff with this game, so definitely recommend it. And at least the parts I played so far, I don't have too much more to get through, but I do plan on finishing this sometime soon. And probably seeing how the story ends, because it's very quaint so far. I also started Echoes of Aincrad, the new Sword Art Online game, and was also pleasantly surprised. I was not expecting too much, because usually Sword Art Online games, they have a bad rep. That, like many licensed games, especially if you're not that into the IP, I've only seen like the first 2 seasons of Sword Art Online, and it's been years since I watched them. Though, to be honest, after playing the prologue and a little bit into the first chapter of Echoes of Aincrad, I've been meaning to rewatch the first season of Sword Art Online. It made me feel so nostalgic while playing the game. I did really like the premise that you're not so much, playing a game like it was in the anime, or I guess the light novel where these originated, but more of if you were in that world, in that same sort of time, you're stuck in that video game, what would your character do? And I think that was really a smart move from Bandai Namco of how to kind of repurpose this IP and make it more of a generalized RPG experience. And I think there were some cool elements with the combat and some of those story kind of stuff. I need to get further in it to see how I really feel, but so far the amount I played, I do want to play more. And then last but not least, the other game that I've sampled so far that has come out this year is Disgaea Mayhem, and I just finished my first impression streams of this actually. I got up to the end of episode 3, for those curious, and for this game, I wasn't expecting too much. I was intrigued because I have played the first Disgaea game, the Disgaea Complete version of that on the Switch way back when. And I was kind of curious how they would tackle in this world or the setting a Disgaea Muso or Warriors type action RPG game. And I think the thing I liked the most about this game so far is just the silly story, because it's all about this overlord is contacted a mercenary and is having him basically go up to all of her disgraced or traitorous people in her realm and demand that they give back her flan, because they stole her flan, which flan being the food. And it's just so quirky and funny. This is like signature Nippon Ichi Disgaea sort of writing. Over the top, whimsical, quirky, weird, but fun. The gameplay is fun, especially I think once you level up your character and the weapons. There's definitely a huge incentive to grind all this stuff out to ridiculous levels so you could just hit ridiculous numbers, just like the regular Disgaea games. The action combat is pretty clunky, I'm not gonna lie. And when I was playing this, I actually didn't play it on the PS5, I played it on PC. Prior to launch, it did have some crashing issues, unfortunately. They're supposed to be patched out on the day one, but I'm making this before day one happened, so I don't know exactly what happened, but I'm sure they'll probably get patched out at some point. It's just, when I was playing it was a little disappointing. But despite all that, I had fun with it. It's not like, this game's probably not going to wow you, especially if you don't know anything about Disgaea, and if you're more familiar with, say, the Koei Tecmo Warriors games. This has, you don't have like recruitable member or party members or anything like that. It's just you, the mercenary, and you could recruit like a monster to fight alongside you. So I was trying to get my first preemie, just have him maxed out, though he kept dying on me, which was also kind of funny, I won't lie. But there's a lot of different weapons and things you can experiment with, and definitely there's things, I think there's fun you can definitely find in this. It's just not going to be, you know, mind-blowing. But if you like Disgaea, maybe it's worth trying. There is a demo if you do want to give it a shot. But those are all the brand new releases that I've had a chance to play so far this year. There are other games that are on my backlog or ones I've been eyeing. If there's any game that I've missed that you guys think I should play, let me know down in the comments, please. I'm totally open to adding to my growing backlog, of course. But there are, of course, more new releases I'm looking forward to for the rest of this year. And I imagine some of these games might be listed at the end of this year, where I just go through all the games I played this year, including games on my backlog. I'm not really sure how I want to tackle that video, but I'll make something talking about all these great experiences I've had so far this year. But overall, you guys could probably tell most of my experiences with new releases have been positive, mostly because I've selected these games and I knew I probably would like them. There are a few that did leave me disappointed, mostly Fatal Frame 2 Remake was probably my biggest disappointment, and a little bit of Reanimal, and also a little bit of Adventures of Elliot. Not so much that I don't want to buy it physically, just I would say there are things I kind of wished it did better. I won't lie. But I'll talk more about that in a future video for those interested. But yeah, that's it from me. I hope you guys enjoy this. Let me know if you played any of these. Do you have similar thoughts as I did? Or do you have different thoughts? I'd love to hear it. And I guess until my next video. Bye, guys. And I'd like to take this time to thank all of my channel members for helping me make these videos as well as my live streams possible. And a big shout out to my Orbment Architect level members, Trin, Night Noctum, George, Just Another Joe, Dan, Scott Healy, Osman, Stephen, Joe, Champagne Sherpa, Skylet Sane, Glenavere, I am Aki, and Jonathan Stewarts. Thank you so much for all of your support.